Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Alex Avila with Love University. Please make sure you like, comment, and subscribe on today's video. Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Alex Avila with Love University, and we're back. I'm an author, psychologist, and speaker. Every week we talk about how to love ourselves and others in a higher nature, how to improve our finances, career, health, relationships, and spirituality. And today we have a very interesting guest. This is Karl Dunn sitting here with us. He's a multi-award winning advertising creative director, a global citizen who's lived in many countries, and an advertising consultant who has worked and lived in 11 cities throughout the world. He is a keynote speaker for divorce reform for mental health and same-sex divorce, and is the author of his first book, How to Burn a Rainbow. Welcome to the show, Karl.
Thank you very much. Really nice to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Now, you identify, you were telling me off camera, as a gay man, and you wrote this book talking about gay marriage and gay divorce especially. Now, recently, I've been watching this series called The Bachelor. You may have heard about it. It's very famous. And there's a interesting bachelor named Carlton Underwood that I was looking at this past season. And it turned out he was a football player and picked a lady at the end of the show. But then he turned out to be gay, or actually, came out as gay, and then recently married a gay man. And it's interesting. Have you heard of Carlton Underwood by any chance? The famous actor, reality star?
I must confess, no, I don't. I'm not a big watcher of reality shows.
Okay. Well, I mean, it was a big thing because obviously he's the first to come out as gay after the show. It's a show where you pick out of 30 women in this case, you pick your fiance and then marry them. So in the interview that he had afterwards, and he recently married a man, he was saying that he considers himself like 75% gay. He thinks there's a continuum in a sense. He's attracted to a woman, but he never acted upon it. He's actually a virgin until the show. So what's your take on that? Did you have any experiences with women or interested in that, or have you always identified with the same sex?
No, I have always been attracted to men. My earliest childhood memories of having, there were, men who I was friends of my parents who I was kind of obsessed with, and I didn't really understand it at the time, of course, but when I look back now, I think, oh, it was like a childhood crush. Like I can see it now.
Yes.
But back then it was just like, oh, sweet, he really likes, this lumberjack friend of the family's. I should preface that by saying I was born in Canada in a small mining town, so you either worked in mining or in lumber, so it was a lot of miners and lumberjacks, yes, right. For real, not just dressing up.
So you never had any relationship with a female in a romantic sense or any interest?
No.
As far as you know?
No.
And this idea of being a certain percentage of heterosexual versus gay, how do you feel about that? Is that something that you've come across, or is it?
Oh, yeah, I think that's absolutely true. I think we're all definitely on a spectrum of some sort. When I came out as a gay man, that was at a very particular time in our history where it was seen very much as a political act, and you had to 100% commit to it. And anyone who was bisexual in any form, there was no space for that in the world that I grew up in, because then you were kind of like a double agent, or, trying to have the best of both worlds or something. That was how we perceived it back then. Right.
I see. Now, in the LGBTQ plus community, we're looking at marriages now that is legal in many places. And they said that approximately 10% of individuals in this community do get married legally. And the divorce rate is about 2% a year, which is equivalent to heterosexual as well. What's your finding on that? Is there more or less marriages or divorces going on these days among the LGBTQ community?
Well, I think the statistics are it's too early for us to be really able to know how true these are going to be over time, because certainly in that first wave of same-sex couples who got married, it was a lot of couples who'd been together a long time.
Yes.
So the relationship was already proven. It was already something that was functioning, and they just got married because now they could do this. I think it's too early to know how we are going to perform in this, arena, if we're going to somehow do marriage better in any way. But I don't think so. We're all human beings, and we all have the same problems and issues and make the same mistakes. So I don't imagine we're going to do it any better. We're not sort of magically going to be better at this. But let's see. I mean, let's see what younger people in the community do with it.
Right. So you're a more mature
Yeah,
man, and who knows if it's going to be the same for the new generations. You're saying
exactly.
now the other thing is now your book really is very interesting. By the way, very well written, very kind
Thank
of
you. Thank you very much.
eye-catching, and you talk about some of the differences, or you mentioned differences between same-sex and heterosexual marriages and divorces, which we're going to get into. But I want to get into your story. Now, you have a very interesting story. You said you were with a man named Gunnar, which I guess you call him Gunnar, who became your husband. And
yes,
you said you were with him for 7 years. You got married, and on the honeymoon, he had an affair or had sex with another person, another man. And then you became angry, even though you said you had an open relationship. And this kind of triggered rethinking of the whole marriage and all that. So what happened there? This was back in Vienna, I believe it was.
Yeah. Well, this is something I might need to give a little bit of a
Sure.
explanation for your listeners who perhaps are not as familiar with open relationships.
Okay.
It is common, certainly amongst the same-sex marriages I know between gay men. Many of them are open. Some are monogamous, but many of the ones I know are open. So this is not a kind of shocking or foreign concept for us. And in fact, we were open before we got married and then after we got married. But, like we were having our issues, and, I was putting a lot of pressure on myself, and I think also on him, on the idea of what the honeymoon was going to be, because we'd been together for quite a while as a couple already. And, I think Esther Perel talks about this, like the mating in captivity, I was looking for it to be the spark. I was looking for the thing that would somehow magically fix all of our problems, or what I perceived as our problems. And, it wasn't so much the fact that he had hooked up with someone else, but he'd left me standing with no word.
And he disappeared one night. Yes, and then he disappeared one night and then came back?
No, he was gone for, it sort of was an unexpected one that just came up, but he didn't tell me about it. And I was left standing. And that was the bit that angered me, because I was like, what happened to him? Is he okay? Has he had an accident? Because he was late to meet.
Right.
And then when he finally did turn up, and the reason became clear why, that's when I was angry, because to me it seemed, well, actually, at the time, it seemed to me like it was a gross, betrayal of, like, I'm your husband. I am supposed to be the most important one. But if I'm really honest, later on, it was jealousy as well speaking, because it was like, oh, this guy got what I had wanted on our honeymoon. So again, and I think it's very easy to paint my ex-husband as a villain in this scenario, which I don't seek to do, because my reaction to it was my own insecurities, my own sense of lack and incompleteness that made me react the way that I did.
Right. So, Karl, was it the fact that you're on your honeymoon and he did this, and you're thinking once we're married, he'll tell you stuff? Or if he would have just told you, hey, I'm going to have a fling tonight, I know it's a honeymoon, are you okay with that? Would that have changed anything, or would you still have been mad or envious or jealous?
That's a great question. To be honest, at the time, I would have said that's fine. Okay, but I secretly would have been jealous about it.
Okay.
And I think that is also a problem that we were having in many couples' experiences, where you'll say one thing, but you'll feel something else, and you'll, write that up in the scorebook, about, that's going to come back later in some fight, down the track.
Right. So it wasn't just the marriage itself that all of a sudden made you think, oh, we're going to be monogamous. It wasn't about that, you're saying?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
No.
It was just the fact that he just didn't respect you, or, on your honeymoon, or betrayed you, as you say.
It seemed to me like at the time, it seemed like an incredible lack of respect.
Okay. So then you left, you went to Berlin, which is, we'll talk about later, so your favorite city. I think you live there right now, if I'm not mistaken.
I do. I live between here and Los Angeles.
I see.
And I love this city.
Yes. And then I guess a friend of yours named Miriam came up with an idea. You call it Miriam's Law, to take 100% responsibility for what you do. And then you said you went back to him and you guys started working out using this law. Tell us about that part of it.
Well, it's really interesting, actually, in How to Burn a Rainbow. Many advanced readers have got to this part where Miriam is introduced as a character and delivers this knowledge. And many of them have said they've had to actually put the book down and go, wow, I need to think about my own life here for a moment.
Okay.
Because Miriam is a woman I've known for years. She was actually the reason I first started coming to Berlin, because her agency had employed me to work on a project for them. We pitched and won this big piece of business. And so I would come back every year to work on it. So I started my relationship with, my friendship with her, my relationship with this city. And I came back on this trip. Miriam had a new baby, and she also had a new advertising agency. And I was like, well, what's the story here? Because we had obviously had a lot to catch up on. And according to her, she had gone away to have her child and come back, and it had been made clear to her in the time that she was away that she was sort of redundant within her own company and forced out, and like bought out of her part of it. This is my understanding of how this went. And I was incensed on her behalf, fresh off my own betrayals or my feelings of betrayal, on my honeymoon. And I hear this, I'm like, what? Like, she's a woman who's gone away to have a baby, and these guys did what? I was furious on her behalf. And she said to me, look, Carl, anger is not required.
Hmm.
She said, I know those guys better than they know themselves. I mean, I know them really well. And I knew if I ever went away for any period of time, this would happen. So I made my choice, and my choice was to have my child over my business. And then she said these words to me. She said, how can I be angry at them for doing exactly what I expected them to do? Mm-hmm. And that really landed with me, because when I then reflected on this, fight and that my ex-husband and I had, and me running off to Berlin, I had been expecting something like this to happen. I had been rehearsing, like, half the things I said to him in this fight, I'd rehearsed them in anticipation of this moment,
right?
Which means I was at least 50% responsible for what had happened, maybe more. It was this radical idea that she presented of, responsibility for what and your part in something. It was radical responsibility. And that was not at all how I had lived my life till that point.
So you're taking 100%. You're taking 100% responsibility for what you do, and they do the same. Is that the idea?
Yes. So I said to my ex-husband when we met up again, that, I had met up with Miriam, and she had said this thing to me that, and I had started to call this Miriam's law, about radical, self-responsibility. And he understood it straight away. He understood it implicitly. And we started using it as something in our relationship that was really useful, because it stopped being a finger-pointing exercise of you did this and you made me feel this and that. And anything that happened between the two of us after that, whether he had done it or I had done it,
right,
we would both say, okay, this thing happened. We're both going to take 100% responsibility for our half of it. We'll own it 50-50.
Right.
Now let's talk about it. And so when there's no attempt to blame the other one, the analogy I use in the book is that we were like architects looking at a 3D, rendering of our building. Like, we could talk about it objectively. There was him, there was me, and then there was our relationship. And it was incredibly useful for us. It was a really useful tool, and it worked very well for a while.
Right. Now, Carl, I know you want to keep this confidential, but is there anything you can tell us about Gunnar? Some of our listeners may be curious. You mentioned he's a tall, handsome guy, number one, but in terms of career or personality, was there anything that you can let us know about? Not career. You don't want to identify him.
No.
All right. How about like personality? Because in the book, I don't know if there's a lot that comes out. He seems like an intelligent guy. He understood the Miriam's law. But anything else about him that you liked in the beginning? Was there any psychological qualities?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, from the moment we met, we started having this conversation, and it just continued for years.
It was a good conversation.
Fantastic.
Good talker.
Yeah. I mean, just this, we could talk about any topic. He was incredibly well-read, very educated, worldly, and very interested in the world and people, and quite gregarious, very magnetic. He had a very magnetic personality.
Charismatic, shall we say.
Yeah. In fact, actually, a guy, it was very funny. I used to work at this advertising agency in San Francisco, and one of the founders came over one day, and he said, "Oh, you know what I really need today?" And I'm like, "What?" He goes, "I need a Gunnar hug." I'm like, he was famous for his hugs.
Oh, I
He was
see.
quite a hugger.
Very,
And
very
he'd
affectionate.
hugged this guy once, and this guy was so struck by
Right,
the power of this hug. So
right, right.
he had I mean, he was in, when I met him, I was like, wow. I mean,
Mm.
I was really blown away by
I
him.
see. Now, the thing is,
Mm,
though, Carl, you're talking about the timeline. So you're married. Looks like 2016, and by
mm,
17, you said the marriage was over,
yeah.
and it seemed like pretty short lived, even though you were together for 7 years. I don't know. Is that something that occurs in same sex marriages, short duration, or is that just something in your case that happened?
No, I think it's just something that occurs in marriages where you get
Mm.
married to fix the problems instead
Ah,
of doing the work to actually solve the problems.
I see.
And I can only speak from my
Sure.
part of our,
Right.
I don't,
Right.
obviously when we started getting divorced, we never really talked too much after
Right.
that.
But it was about a year that it lasted, I guess, the marriage.
I think we got about 2 years. I mean,
2 years
2 years.
in.
We were together a year, and that's when we went on the honeymoon, and then we lasted another year after that.
Oh, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. So you got married
Mm.
and divorced, or more or less in a year time.
In about a year and a half, two
Year and a half.
years.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it takes a little
Yeah.
time. Now, the one
Yeah.
thing you said is a friend of yours kind of gave you this thought to think about. He says, Gunnar is not that into you. He's about
Yeah.
himself. Now, we know we throw around a lot of terms like narcissists and, other terminologies of people that are self-centered and all that. Is that kind of where you're getting about? Or what was that concept of he's only into himself?
Well, I think, narcissism is a word that gets thrown around a lot
Right.
these days. And I think people are sort of, they love to blindly throw it at
Sure.
anyone who doesn't give them what they want.
Yes.
I'm not a psychologist. I don't know. But,
Was he
the
self-centered? Do you feel
observation.
that he didn't care as much about you as you wanted him to? Or how would you classify that?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, we definitely had we had our problems where, there was definitely an imbalance in our relationship. And this is again a really difficult problem in same-sex relationships
Mm.
is if one is making a lot more than the other one. I mean, just
Mm.
because of how we're raised as men in
Right.
this society, that we
Mm.
value ourselves by what we do and how much we make, it can be dynamite,
Mm.
and it was a prickly part of our
So
relationship.
you were making more than him or vice versa?
Yes, I was making more.
Okay.
I mean, I was working in advertising. I was at the top of my game.
I see. Okay.
It's an insanely
Well, why is that a
well-paid
problem?
role.
Wouldn't he want to be the guy that's taken care of kind of idea? Or did he feel like his ego was in play? He wanted to balance you.
I don't know. I think it can lead, and I think in our relationship, to a competitiveness between
Mm.
us,
Right.
which is, that's not a great dynamic.
Mm.
And I made my contribution to whatever it was that created that, for sure.
Okay.
Um,
Well, the
I
fact that you
think
were
at the
making more
time,
money, did he get like envious about that? Or did he kind of like power struggle wise want to show that he's stronger than you? Or how did that come into play?
well, I mean, I can only speculate. It's only my opinion. But I think, when there's a difference there, and also we had an age difference, and I was younger than
Ah,
he was. And I mean, we know how masculinity is presented to us and the way that it's
sure.
supposed to work and how the hierarchy is meant to work. And when those things flip around, I think it can be really difficult for both people in the
Hmm.
relationship.
I understand. Yeah.
Mm.
Now, you do have an interesting catchphrase in your book. You say, my marriage didn't make me whole, my divorce did, which is kind of an
Yeah.
interesting catchphrase. And then you have other interesting terms here. I want to go with, talk about some of these. You said you leave when you have nothing left to learn. Tell us about
Mm.
that. What's this process that apparently the divorce made you better?
Well, I mean, my divorce made me better because a lot of it was because of what I decided to do with it, which is something we can talk about,
Sure.
some more, because I made a very active decision to use it. But the you leave when you have nothing left to learn. That was about, I think when you leave someone, the immediate feeling of this was the right idea. You can beat yourself up for, I should have done this years ago. Why didn't I leave, way back then when this happened or when this happened? But I think, the place I got to with it was, you don't leave the first time you think of it. You don't leave the 100th time you think of it. You leave when you have nothing left to learn in this relationship.
Mhm.
It's taught you everything that you need to know about yourself, wherever you are on your journey at this time. And you left at exactly the right time. And that was how I made peace with, the person who stayed longer. Mm.
Right. But so you're looking at divorce as a self-development tool, but
Mm.
not everyone has that kind of awareness. Now, I would imagine therapy, if you went through therapy, you work through these things and you look back and you see that, you were able to learn and improve in some ways. But at the time, there's a lot of pain when you go through the first
Mm.
time of the divorce. Were you that self-aware at the moment of the divorcing? Or is it something you gain perspective later through, therapy or, spiritual practice or something else?
No, actually, I did see a therapist in LA, but we had stopped seeing each other before the divorce began.
Mm,
And, my therapist is a wonderful therapist. He really helped me through a lot of issues that I was struggling with,
right,
and being in a relationship, and
right.
also just trying to basically, I was trying to figure myself out. I didn't really know who I was.
Right.
And in my divorce, when in the early days of it, I met up with a friend of mine who had just had his first kid. And we had this conversation, and it was a really enlightening moment for me, because he was, like many other heterosexual male friends of mine,
Mhm.
have overgrown boys, and then their wives or girlfriends get pregnant for the first time, and
Ah,
they go, whoa, I've
mhm.
got to be like a role model to a human being in 9 months. Like, who am I? What do I stand for? What are my values? And the men I know figure themselves out. Like, it takes longer than 9 months, obviously, but it causes them to have this crisis of identity. And one of the things in our community, because we don't, we can have children, but you've really got to make special efforts to make this happen.
Right.
Sort of natural, but like, it's not like a sort of byproduct intuitively of a same-sex couple. So you have to, So I thought, well, I'm never, so, I think as a community, I speak for myself here. I certainly was carrying on a bit of a Peter Pan lifestyle. I didn't have this moment. Maybe it might have come from, both my parents, thank goodness, are both still alive. Maybe if one of them had passed, maybe that would have been the moment. But it turned out it was
Right.
this divorce. I thought I could use this as my crisis of identity. I could use this to not keep running to the next thing, to fix me, and to stop searching for external validation, but instead use this to help me dig down and figure out, who am I? Like,
Right.
why have I found myself in the same relationship, in the same dynamics,
Right.
like, five or
Yes.
six times in a row?
Right. You seem
Yeah.
quite self-reflective and even philosophical. I wrote a book, bestseller called Love Types, on Myers-Briggs personality type and
Yes.
relationships.
Yes.
And you seem like you could be what I call the idealistic philosopher, someone who's kind of internal and also maybe emotional and maybe intuitive in some ways. That has maybe a spiritual bent. And I think you mentioned Buddhism in the book there. Do you have any
Hmm.
kind of spiritual practice, or do you feel you have the search for meaning in your life?
Yeah, I mean, the spirituality of the journey that I'm on, and we're all still on them. We're at whatever point
Yes.
we're at it, and there is no destination, or no final destination. There's just the continuation of the journey. But I discovered Buddhism when I was living in Japan for a while, and it made a lot of sense to me as a religion, because I think they don't have a very hard stance on homosexuality, and they have it's also, I think, a religion that's very much aware of nature. Even the representation of Buddha is not really gendered in the way that we read it in other religious books. So yeah, I started there, and I was very into the practice, but I would have to say, over the years, I became, very much a Sunday Buddhist.
One thing I want to cover is I haven't read a lot about it, but the idea you mentioned you're friends with heterosexual or straight men, and you even
Yes.
mentioned in the book that they straight divorced men became your best friends
Mm.
because they commiserate, I guess, with their own divorces and all that. So the idea of say gay men and straight men as friends, and also gay men and lesbian women as friends. What's your experience with that? Is that something that's easy or hard to do? How does that work?
Well, I think with, I'm of a certain generation of gay men, like I had
Right.
said before.
Right.
I was born in the 1970s. I came out
Right.
as soon as I finished high school.
Right.
And things were very different back then in Australia.
Yes.
So, I had many of the typical experiences that you hear about young gay men with, the threats of violence
Sure.
against you, people threatening to kill you.
Right.
And it's always heterosexual men. I mean, and we, these are the men that we tried to,
Mm.
emulate as we were growing up,
Right.
because we could see that if we acted like they acted, we would get validation from society. So
Sure.
we impersonated them for a while. And,
Mm.
these are the guys who would beat me up in high school. And they're also
Right.
the ones who get to write the
But are they your
laws.
friends now? The guys that used to beat you up, or I mean, that kind of
Oh no, not
not
those
those guys, but
particular ones,
but
but
other
I
other
think
heterosexual
I
males.
definitely have heterosexual male friends.
Yeah.
Absolutely, very dear friends to me. But I always, whenever I meet a new one, I'm always hanging back a couple of degrees.
Mm.
I'm like, just gonna wait and hang back and see if you're one of the cool ones, or one of the ones that wants to kill us.
Ah, okay.
And you have to kind of feel them out a little bit,
Right.
before, and look, in every group of gay men,
Sure.
we always have like straight girlfriends, and when they
Oh, yeah.
introduce like the new boyfriend, we're all like, all right, let's see what this one's about.
So we see that a lot in movies, right? The gay best friend idea.
Yes,
Being
yeah,
best.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So, but I would say like what, my divorce transformed that. I mean, I lost my kind of lifelong fear of heterosexual men, because what I realized, my own community has no experience with divorce. So my friends were incredibly supportive, but they couldn't advise me on what to do.
Yes.
I'm getting divorced according to these laws that really are written for the battle of the sexes, that made very little sense to a same-sex divorcing couple, but
Right.
these are the ones we inherited.
Right. How about with lesbian and females? Do you have friends among that community?
I do. I've had not so much here in Berlin, actually, strangely, but definitely when I was living in Los Angeles.
Mm.
Um, and I think that's probably a generational thing, I
Mm.
would say.
Mm.
The bars, I have bisexual friends who are, I always struggle a little bit with the language, but I have bisexual friends who are females and identify
Right.
as female.
Right.
I have friends who are, have a kind of non-binary understanding of their gender, but who are in what we would think of as a female body.
Right.
But I don't really have any lesbian friends here. But in LA, I did. I
Mm.
mean,
Okay.
I love me the lesbians. They're great.
I see.
They're great.
So friends,
Yeah.
friends can be very important when you go through difficult times, especially like a divorce. You're saying. Now you had an interesting.
Yes.
You call it the friend filter, where you look at different reactions among friends. Now I don't know if this is heterosexual or gay friends, or if there's a difference. Maybe you'll clarify that. But you said there are certain kind of friends that are on your side no matter what. I mean, they're all supportive with you. They stick with you. Maybe even go to divorce proceedings. Maybe. And then you have another kind that are caring about it, but they don't want to get involved. Maybe they have their own traumas that may be triggered by being around a divorcing person. And then you have the ones that are on, you call them Team Gunnar, which is, I guess, your ex, right? They're definitely for him, those kind of joint friends.
Yeah.
And then finally you said there's what we call the binge watchers that love the drama, hungry for the gruesome details. So is that in the gay community, or is that overall, you think there are those kind of four classifications of friends?
Look, I think it's a type of behavior that anybody can, adopt. My experience of it was with gay men in the gay community, people who were friends of ours and knew us as a couple.
Right.
I would say not the really close friends, but the sort of more peripheral friends. And there were definitely some of them who were feeding off the drama. But we were one of the earliest couples to get divorced in sort of the LA gay world. Well, I mean, to be honest, I didn't know anyone else in our community who'd been through it. So
when did gay marriage become legal in California? Do you remember the year?
Oh,
15, 16?
I should know this, but I've forgotten.
Okay.
It must have been I think it was more like 14. Like we had it once.
Okay.
And then it was repealed.
Okay.
And then it was reinstated.
Right. So it's a fairly new thing, apparently, in the States, right, in California.
Yes.
And then you got married in what was it, Vienna, I believe you said, in 17? It was 17?
We got married in 20. Actually, we were married in 2015, and then we began our divorce proceedings in 2017.
Okay, and then
Yeah,
you
we
went to
were
the
married
honeymoon.
in.
Yes.
Yeah, we were on a honeymoon in Vienna, but we
in
were
the
married
60s.
in San Francisco.
I see.
In the city hall, which is
I see.
beautiful. Oh, what a building! Wow,
Now, you know,
gorgeous.
in psychology, there's a term called downward comparison, social psychology, where you compare yourself to people that are doing worse, so you actually feel better. And upward comparison is when you compare yourself with the people who are doing better and you feel worse. So it's kind of an interesting dynamic. So those friends are gossiping, or, I mean, they like the gory details. You think they're feeling a little better if you tell them, my lawyer screwed me over and this and that. What motivates people like that, do you think, that have that kind of mindset? Or is it just,
Look,
the
I think
atrocity?
I think people feed off the drama,
Right.
as a way of, distracting themselves from their own lives, their own problems,
Right.
I mean, the journey that I went on, to end up in a place of self-love is a very transformational one. And once you, I don't want to say arrive there, because it's not a destination. It's just it's a feeling you arrive at and then begin to explore and develop and enrichen for yourself. But looking backwards now, I see, look, I loved me some drama way back then as well, as a diversion to my own issues that I was not willing to square off with. So
Yes.
I understand the behavior better. Yeah, but there were definitely, and also look, in a very contentious divorce like we had, and you're talking to one friend and saying, well, this happened, and then this happened,
Sure.
and this happened. And then when this one person said, really? Because that's not how Gunnar described it. You're like, whoa, yeah, wait, you're talking to both of us about this?
Right, different perceptions.
And then you start thinking,
yes,
what did I say? Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
So
he said, I guess you would say in this case.
Yeah, very he said.
Two sides of the coin.
Yes.
Now, the other thing is interesting. You talk about divorcing your job. Now, you're apparently very successful in your position, I guess, in advertising and working a lot of hours. Now, there's a term we use today called toxic productivity. It used to be called workaholic. I think you're saying you're working 7 days a week and this and that. And then were you doing that to distract yourself from the divorce, or you just needed the money, or you loved your work? What was going on? And you eventually left your job. Tell us about what happened.
Yeah. Well, honestly, overtime is an industry norm in advertising. And I think I could say this about most industries in America. I mean, it is a very work-centric culture.
Right.
And, if you choose to work there, as I did, you've got to get with the program. And if everyone else is doing it, that's what you're doing. So, yeah, I was, unfortunately, the account I was running kind of went into overdrive at the same time as my divorce began. So the impossible physics of the time that both these two, because when you start getting divorced, that is like having another full-time job. It is incredible how much time it takes up. It is, I had no idea the volume of work that you have to do. And then, of course, that's not even the emotional part of it, which there is no time left for, because you're spending, 60, 70, 80 hours at work. And the combination of the two were not good. And, again, I don't want to demonize the company I was working for at the time. I was working, I was working with a very old dear friend of mine. But the problem is that, there in corporate America, and I think just in the corporate world in general, I think in the world in general, there's no empathy or sympathy for people who are going through divorces, separations, and the breakup of long-term relationships. It gets filed under leave your personal life at home. Whereas, we have leave for bereavement, we have for parental leave, we have long-term illness, we have a lot of understanding and a lot of capacity to care for those things. But when you're getting a divorce, you suddenly realize there is nothing on offer. And you've got to just turn up on Monday morning at 9 o'clock and go, okay, let's do a great job, everyone.
Exactly. That's important.
Meanwhile, your life is on fire.
Yeah, exactly. The mental health component of divorce, and I think you want to talk about, or you do talk about that. That's a very important untapped area, I would think. And especially for males, because males may lose their children, custody issues, visitation issues. And also, some males don't really express their feelings as much. So it's internalized.
Yes.
Then it builds up, right? And they feel angry and they don't know how to express it, and their buddies may not understand. So that's an issue. And of course, the legal process by itself is a whole thing you can talk about, and I'm sure you did. That could be very difficult. They say that in the beginning of a relationship, everything your partner says is funny, so you're all laughing like crazy. At the end of the marriage, the only ones that are laughing are the divorce attorneys, because they're making a lot of money. Yes. So that's important to realize that. And I know you went through some of that. Was it a difficult, the legal part of it, the financial part?
It was, yeah. I mean, here's again a very interesting thing about divorces, and this is what happened to me, is that I was paying all of my legal fees, I was paying all of my ex-husband's legal fees, the community costs to cover everything that we had, and then also alimony. I was giving over almost half my income as well. But
you're the higher earner, right? You're the one making during the marriage.
And this is a very strange, this was the part I could not understand about the legal system, is if it is about equalizing between income and expenses, I could understand that. But to then equalize the income and then one is expected to still carry all the expenses is like, well, I'm actually not the one who earns the most anymore. I'm like, we're earning the same now if I'm paying this much, but why am I? And this is the law. I mean, my ex-husband did nothing illegal, nothing illegal at all. I want to stress that. And that's actually what made it kind of crazier. Because, I mean, my gay friends couldn't believe what was going on. But you guys don't have kids. Like, how is this? How is it? Like, nobody could figure the math of this out. And again, like I kind of touched on this earlier, was that, divorce law is written very much for the battle of the sexes as they stood at the end of the 80s and the start of the 90s. And those laws are in place for very good reasons to protect women and children against men who would just abandon them and leave them. So those laws in that place for those reasons, I am 100% in favor of. But, then when you apply it to two men or two women who are getting divorced, especially when there's no children, it's like, there seems to be a crime that's been committed because I'm being punished, but I don't know what the crime was. It was a very strange experience.
Okay, so that kind of changed your perspective. I think did you end up moving out of the country or something and then living with lower means kind of thing?
I sure did. Yes, partly by plan and partly by accident. So I got fired from my job, and I think a big part of that was my mental state at the time. My client left the agency, and I would hazard a guess that my performance at the time, I mean, it was not. I mean, if you read the book, if you read How to Burn a Rainbow, you can read all about my fiery descent. It wasn't pretty. And I was not a good boss. I was not. I mean, and that's, again, the other thing, like we really need to take care of people when they're going through divorces because it just makes good business sense. But
when you downshifted your lifestyle, did you live in a semi-poverty state or a simple state?
It was a very basic state. So I went from, the kind of Dwell magazine 3-story concrete bunker loft house in the LA hills to a few months later, I'm sleeping on an air mattress in a former squat. It's an artist collective now, but it's in Berlin. And I have like $500 left and I had no visas and no lawyers. I'd been fired by my first lawyers and there was no end of my divorce in sight.
And were you unhappy there then?
I was happy to escape the States because I felt at the time, I felt like I really do love so much about America. There are things that are very dear to me about the country. But, at that point in my life, I felt very much like I had been ground up and spat out the other side by the corporate world, by the legal system, that I was like, and I'm out. So I just got on, as soon as I was fired, first plane to Berlin.
I see.
I was there.
I see. Interesting.
But yeah, I suddenly found I had a little bit of money left, and then because I had to pay another, things for my divorce, I suddenly almost had no money, and I started collecting bottles to,
Sorry for the
gather enough money.
Simplistic lifestyle. Minimalistic.
I mean, very much so. And I had I wanted to, I could have reached out to family or friends. I mean, there was never a point where I was about to end up on the street. I don't want to make it sound like that. But I'd fallen so far, I thought, well, I'm not dead. Let's see how I can manage from here,
Right.
because I'm clearly being given a massive re-education by the universe. So
Of course.
let me just receive it and go with it. So yeah, I lived a very simple, very basic existence.
Right.
But what was great about it was when there's no money left and you can't just kind of go to that next restaurant or buy that next jacket or whatever, your distractions disappear.
Right.
And that actually was a really key part to the journey of figuring myself out. Because if I'd had one option to kind of get out of this situation I was in,
Sure.
or some more money would fall on my lap, I can tell you it would have been a very different book. How to Burn a Rainbow wouldn't have been the story.
Or even another
is.
relationship. What if you would have just fallen into another marriage or something quickly?
Oh, thank goodness that didn't happen.
A lot of people
I mean,
do
I
that.
tried.
They do the
I
rebound.
tried.
It's pretty common. Yeah.
I mean, there's a character in there who I call John Hare, and
I think I saw
had
that.
I been, yeah, had I been given half the chance, if John had been willing, we would have been dating.
Okay. Distracting.
Because
Okay.
I would have loved to have had the distraction, and thankfully, for my benefit, and for reasons that people can read about in the book, we just never got it together. There was clearly an incredible attraction between us, and he was the person who had gotten me into the collective so that I had somewhere to stay. But yeah, I mean, thank goodness I didn't dive into the next thing, because I wouldn't have finished I would honestly, it would be 5 years later and I would be having another breakup for all the same reasons that.
Yeah, because the externals, from my perspective, can help you become stronger and grow, but not necessarily to make you feel better, because the feeling you have from an external scenario will dissipate. Whether it's food, sex, power, whatever it is that you're looking for. But what you did, you went down to the minimalistic stage, and you grew internally and became, a more aware and stronger person. And that's a very powerful thing. Now, one thing I was looking at, this is very interesting. Now, I haven't thought about this idea, but you say why I got married, and you give us some reasons. So you start with, you're in love, of course, except for the cause of same-sex marriages is something new. You want to support that. The thing is, it's something interesting. You said to be anti-gay. And the way you describe it is you say that it's anti-rejection and anti-disposable relationships. You say when gay people grow up, they're often rejected or feel rejected, so they may reject others in their community and relationships. Is that what you're saying? And marriage is the opposite of that. So can you explain that to us?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a fantastic book called The Velvet Rage, Overcoming the Pain of Growing Up Gay in a Straight Man's World, and it's written by Alan Downs. And he is a therapist who had a majority of his clients I'm not, actually, I don't know if he's still practicing, but this book is, it explained things to me as a gay man about why I did the things I did. It had a very interesting resurgence when PrEP came out in San Francisco. Suddenly this book had a second run, like everybody was passing it around. Everyone was talking about this book. And it was almost like an instruction manual as a gay man. When I was reading it, I'm like, oh my God, that's why I do what I do. And one of the things that Alan Downs talks about is how we are, validation junkies, because, and I certainly am, because, we seek validation as children. And the way to get that is to act like people that we aren't. And so the validation comes, and like you say, the external, it feels good, but it doesn't last, because it's not who we are. And we know this, but we're children, like we're still trying to figure this out. So we chase the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And I think there is, and this is just my opinion. I am definitely no incredibly long-term relationships between gay men and lesbians, so I don't want to make it sound like this is us as a community,
Right.
But there is definitely a kind of grass is always greener. There is a disposability, I think, to relationships in general today. But I think in our community, I saw it really first in our community before what I see it today.
Do you feel it's because they were rejected or disposed of as when they were younger? Is that a projection? of
I
their
would
experience?
say, well, I think one of the problems we suffer from as a community is that there's there's no there's a big gap in our spiritual education, I would
Mhm.
say. So I think what's really unique about us as a minority is that we're not born to our own kind.
Hmm.
So we are a naturally occurring phenomenon. Whether you believe in God 100%, that God made everything and made all the world and all of that, or whether you believe 100% in science or nature, there's no denying that we are part of the plan because we don't like naturally procreate. We turn up every generation, everywhere around the world. I mean, we're clearly meant to be here. But because we're not born in houses with, like, I didn't have gay parents and gay brothers and sisters and gay grandparents and, gay thought and gay music and all the things that, say, my African American friends have or my Latino friends have
Right.
or Asian friends have. We don't have that. So we're born in other people's cultures and we don't know who we are, but we're told by society what we are is wrong.
Right.
It's a very confusing place to grow up. And so when you do actually find one another, finally, when you find, a lot of people are trying to get out of those small towns and get to the big city to,
Right.
because there they'll be okay, they'll be safe. They know that there are others like them there.
Mm.
When we finally meet each other, it's in bars.
Mm.
And in the context of sex and sexual conquest and consumption of, like alcohol, it's in a kind of social setting. There's
Mm.
been no spiritual laddering up to that.
Mhm.
And I think that's one of I would say that's an observation I make about our community, but I can definitely speak for myself.
Right.
Even coming from Sydney, a very gay city with
Mhm.
incredibly cool parents, I still felt this emptiness, this
Right.
spiritual
Right.
emptiness.
So the
And it's
marriage,
something.
you thought it was a spiritual vehicle for ascendance, and that's why you wanted to get married. Something
Um,
that was
I would
different from the,
say
the typical things.
no. I think for me, it was about putting a stake in the ground to say
Mm.
I'm about permanence.
Okay.
This one, I am committing to
Yes.
this guy.
Okay.
This go round the sun, it's him and me, and I will
Right.
get married as a symbol of that. And
Mm.
I very much believed in that at the time. I
Right.
loved my ex-husband. I thought I was going to spend the rest of my life with him.
I see. But then you said
And
that at the very end of this, you're going through all this turmoil and pain and
Mhm.
suffering and enlightenment and understanding. You say, "I am happy to be with the imperfectly perfect me," and
Yeah,
you fell in love with yourself. You said at the end, and you said,
yeah.
"I don't need a rainbow. I am the pot of gold." So people always
Hmm.
say chasing the pot of gold and the rainbow, which means like actualizing your dreams and hopes and realization. So you said you realized that you didn't have to go out there as much chasing that, but you had it inside, which is kind of our Love University motto here: loving yourself, others, in the higher nature. But loving yourself is part of the process.
It
And
starts from there.
you got to
Yes,
that point.
you
Mhm.
have to love yourself. And I arrived there almost like there was no, I always imagined it would be a big moment, like I would radiate light or, there would be,
Mhm.
that like the final scene of a movie or something and instead it was a very quiet moment where I realized, oh, I'm absolutely fine. There was a guy I saw who I quite liked and we'd been talking and, I'd said to him, hey, like, I think you're really interesting. Like, I think you're a very handsome, very interesting man. Da, da, da. And he was like, oh, okay. Sorry, can we rewind to the part of the conversation before you said that and just keep going from there? I'm like, yeah, okay. Yeah, no problem. And we did. And then I left the evening and there was no, you know, head cinema going on about
Hmm.
what's wrong with me? Why didn't he like me? Is it because I
Hmm.
said this? I shouldn't have.
Mhm.
Like, there was none of that. My life did not change.
Ah.
And then after that, I was like, oh, I'm good. I'm good with me. I'm just
Hmm.
good with myself. And
Mhm.
that, what I find interesting about self-love, and I think the part that people don't hear enough about is when you start experiencing this, it changes your perspective on everything.
Mhm.
Now, suddenly, you don't dress for anybody else. You don't live for anybody else. You just do what you feel like doing that comes naturally from within you because you're not trying to impress anyone. There's only internal validation. You don't
Exactly.
need it from the
Yes, it's
outside.
powerful.
It's
Well,
beautiful.
one of our mottos at Love University is to extend loving energy without expectation. And that's the key, because many
Yes.
times, you're at the bar, you're thinking, well, does he like me, not like me? But if you're just flowing with
Mm,
the moment, you're extending loving energy, positivity, and without expectation. So you cannot lose,
mm,
right? And you're expressing the the innerness that you have. That's very beautiful. So you got to that
mm.
point. It took you a couple of years, I guess, or whatever period, or how many years it took you. And
52.
oh well, that's true. And in Berlin, you said in Berlin, people can be whoever they want. You have a lot of good things to say about
Yes.
Berlin. People think of it as like a cold place and people are not too friendly, but is it a nice place to live?
Uh,
Berlin?
Look, I mean, all the cliches you hear are true, and I think that you could say that of every
Sure.
place that you hear about. But the thing about Berlin is, because there is no thing that you're supposed to be doing, you're very free
Right.
to just be with yourself. So, like, if you went to meet a friend for a drink, and they'd say, "What did you do today?" So, I well, actually looked at myself in the mirror for 4 hours. They'd be like, "Oh, right, okay, how was that? What did you
Right.
discover?"
So no designer clothes. You don't have to overly impress people
People here
with
do not talk about money. They are not
ah
impressed by money. They don't care. Like when people say, "What do you do?" They don't mean your job. They mean
ah
what is your passion?
exactly. Okay,
Yeah,
interesting.
they're actually very
The
anti, I would say very anti kind of
status symbol
corporateness
or
and
materialistic or
definitely not
corporate.
about. I
Yeah,
mean, the city is changing, but I think the real soul of the city is
sure.
not to be,
Hmm,
it's not
very nice.
materialistic.
Right. So you find your inner love, you find your inner home, and
Mm.
maybe inner soulmate at some point in the future.
Well,
You know.
funny you should say
Oh,
that.
do you have one?
Yeah, funny
Oh,
you
okay.
should say that. No, I met a lovely guy a couple of years ago, and
Mhm.
Eric has been on his own journey and arrived
Mhm.
at this place that I'm at through a different story and a different way. And it's very interesting. I think that's something else about self-love is when you are happy with yourself and you no longer need someone. You don't
Right.
need another
Right.
person to complete you because you're
Yes.
completing yourself.
Exactly. The
It
inner love.
really changes how you love another person. And my experience of Eric, which I really find it's funny when I look back at how
That could be your
mm,
that could be book two, right? You
I
can
mean it's a
continue. Yeah.
it definitely could be. I mean, all the
Yes.
all the things that would have been deal breakers for me before, all the things that I'd be
Right.
like, okay, I love like 85% of this guy, but that 15% there, like that
Right.
stuff, that drives me crazy. Now it's just
Okay.
like you love all of it. Love the whole thing.
Exactly.
Don't seek to change this person. Love all of
Right.
them as they are. And it's a very different way to be with somebody because you just love the
Mm.
totality of them. And
Right.
for me, what I've found in this
Mhm.
relationship is your capacity for love is so much broader. Like I'm discovering all these new
Mhm.
flavors.
Now, Carl,
Uh,
if you were to redo the book instead of Eat, Pray, Love, would it be, I don't know, something else? A beer, winter schnitzel or something? What would be
uh,
your take on it?
sorry, if I was
Because
asked,
I guess in Berlin you found a lot of answers in
I
Berlin.
did, yeah.
Uh, so can you give me 3 words for your journey? Just like that title of that book that you like.
Um, it'll be great.
Oh, okay, it will be great.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
I don't know if
So
I
like
don't know if
a
yeah,
prosperity,
I don't know if I could pick three objects, but I think just
3 things.
it'll be great. Yeah.
Okay, I like that. Okay, it'll be great. Okay. Well, Carl's it has been great having you on the show today, and we appreciate you flying in mentally from another place. Now, where can people hear more about you? Do you have a website? Now, you mentioned
I
your book.
do.
Do you do other stuff? Any kind of coaching or speaking and stuff like that?
Well,
Where we can reach you?
you can come to my website, which is www.karldunn.com, KARLDUNN. You can find me and everything that I'm up to on there, and also on Instagram, which is where I seem to spend most of my time on the necessary evil of social media.
What is your handle for
It's
Instagram?
my name again. It's Karl Dunn. So at Karl Dunn on
Oh,
Instagram.
Carl Dunn.
Hmm.
Okay, Dunn. Okay,
And yeah,
and you have
I'm about to. I mean, the book publishes on May 17th, so I'm literally about to
congratulations.
fly. Thank you. I'm literally about to fly back to the States, and
Oh, perfect.
yeah, I mean, the thing I think I would say I'm proudest of with this book is that it's the advanced readers have been from all walks of life, all kinds of backgrounds,
Wow.
and what I love about it is that everybody has found themselves in the pages of this book. One of the things I heard a lot at the beginning when I was writing it, it's like, oh, it's a book about gay divorce. Only gay divorcing men are going to buy it. And my point would always be, no, it's about a human being who had a human experience and went on a journey. And
Right.
and
Yes.
the book seems to be being received that way. And that is, honestly, I could never have hoped for anything more. So,
Karl, you do have a very nice voice, very resonant, and I know you seem very knowledgeable. So I think speaking could be a great talent.
I hope to be speaking about
your future.
diversity. I had a
Yes.
very interesting experience with diversity with my,
Yes.
findings with heterosexual men, and also to speak on self-love as well. I think it's a really
Perfect.
important topic.
Yeah, so you're along our lines, right?
Oh.
So Love University would definitely love to have you back.
Oh, I would love it.
And,
Yeah, definitely. Please.
So karldunn.com, everybody. This is Dr. Alex Avila, Love University. Today we learned a lot of interesting lessons. Self-love, loving others, and something higher, and extending love without expectation. And eventually the journey will take us back to our true nature. We go through different obstacles and little hills, but we eventually get to that mountain where we have our true love. Again, this is Dr. Alex Avila. Thank you again, Karl, for being here today. If you want to reach us, you can reach us at loveuniversity.love. Call us at 310-226-8090. Until next time, this is Dr. Alex Avila with Love University. Put away your notebook, your iPads, your phones. Class is now dismissed. That was a very interesting interview with Karl Dunn, who went through an amazing journey of basically self-love, self-acceptance, and also being able to extend love energy without expectation. Many times we go through life wanting certain things, thinking that we need that to be happy. And we realize that the external things don't make us happy, but the external things, whether it's people, objects, environments, can only serve to help us become stronger internally, to give us the tools and the instruments. So in this case, he used divorce, painful though it may be, as an instrument for his own healing and growth. And we can all do that in different ways. So go out this week, have a great Love University week, extend loving energy without expectation, love yourself, others, and a higher nature. Also make sure to follow the social media links below. And on Love the University YouTube channel, make sure you like, follow, and subscribe. We can give you more powerful information on how to love the deepest way you can. Until next time, this is Dr. Alex Avila. Put away your notebooks, your iPads, your phones, and class is really dismissed this time. Until next time.